Hey, Next Economy Now listeners. If you followed our podcast for long, you've probably heard about the Next Economy MBA. What you might not know is that we wrote a book about it, and it's coming out on May 23rd. The Next Economy MBA book combines our experience working with Next Economy organizations and over 400 alumni that have taken our course. It's designed for impact leaders who seek to develop a business strategy from a socially just and environmentally regenerative perspective. This book is a great way to dive deeper into the principles and case stories we discuss on the podcast and includes a workbook to put learnings from the program into practice. You can pre-order a copy for yourself or a friend at lifteconomy.com/MBA book. Thanks for listening. And now, on to the show.
Welcome to Next Economy Now. The goal of this podcast series is to highlight the leaders who are taking a regenerative, bioregional, equitable, democratic, racially just, and whole systems approach to creating the new economy. I'm Ryan Honeyman, a partner at Lift Economy. My guest today is Stu Landesberg. Stu is the co-founder and CEO of Grove Collaborative, a leading sustainable consumer products company transforming the industry into a force for human and environmental good. Grove creates and curates high-performing, planet-first products across household cleaning, personal care, laundry, clean beauty, and pet. And one of the reasons I wanted to invite Stu on the show is because Grove is a publicly traded company, and we don't get to talk to many folks who are trying to create a high-impact company that also has to deal with the realities of the public markets. And I've also known Stu for many years. He was actually one of the first investors in our Force for Good fund, a fund that we launched in 2016 that invested in women and people of color-owned social enterprises. Stu, welcome to the show.
It's great to be with you, Ryan, and congratulations on all of the things over the last, it must be close to a decade now.
It reminds me of the story that you told me when I was asking you for money. I think you're very familiar with raising money, and back then I was like, Stu, will you invest $1,000 in this Force for Good fund? You're like, Ryan, don't ever ask me for less than $5,000 when you're raising money. I think it was
So,
yeah.
It shows you the stage I was in at that point. Man, $5,000. It feels very different time.
Different time, different scale. Can you tell us a bit about your background and how you first got interested in the work you're doing today?
Sure. So I have always cared deeply about sustainability. I grew up in a family where I suppose we were a little bit ahead of our time in terms of from a sustainability perspective. We were the first to get a hybrid. I think we might have even had a V1 Prius. All my paper towels were brown. And it's a true story that as a child, I wanted to be the CEO of the largest company in the world, but I incorrectly identified seventh generation as the largest company in the world. So that tells you a little bit about my worldview. When I got started professionally, I was a little bit of a lost soul. And so I went into the corporate world, into investing, which was an amazing place to learn about business. And one of the things I saw, which led to the creation of Grove, is that consumers really want sustainable products. I believe that consumers are fundamentally good. People are fundamentally good. But the way that the products that show up on shelf, that get real distribution is determined is not necessarily based on consumer preference. And so there was an opportunity to use the internet to create a company basically providing people with the products they want and also products that are more sustainable, right? And so we started Grove back in 2012 with the belief that by going directly to consumers, we could create a brand that could align more closely with consumers' values and simultaneously deliver real environmental impact. And, the vision has changed a little bit over the years, but fundamentally, making consumer products, hand soap, dish soap, paper towels, shampoo, vitamins, whatever it is, a positive force for human and environmental health, we think is a sustainability mandate and a really exciting project to spend, a decade plus working on.
And how did you differentiate between Amazon or there's other, maybe, I think there was other sort of startups around the time, trying to do sustainable products as well, right?
Oh my goodness. There's been so much competition in the space. And Well, I'll tell you that the first way that we differentiated is we just ignored it. And so we tried to really build in a consumer centric way. If I had listened if I had been rational about the amount of competition, we would have gotten started. It was a totally insane undertaking. But the reason we achieved scale and succeeded to the extent that we have is I think we were more customer focused. The company in the first few years, I would sort of like go into Starbucks and give people a $5 gift card to click through the product, get their feedback. And so we built a really different and bespoke experience. And I think in addition to sort of like a different UI, a different sort of digital interface for understanding why you're getting products that are vetted and sustainable and, why something relevant today, aluminum is more sustainable than plastic. With the largest, I think, push against plastic in our space. Grove Co. is the number one zero plastic brand in our category in the world. But it was really about, hey, what do consumers actually want, right? What is the emotional core of the category? And a lot of that has to do with brand. It's not just about, hey, make sustainability convenient. It's about beautiful products that really work, that smell great, that I can feel proud to have in my kitchen. And how do you build a brand that I can trust? Because Amazon, I trust Amazon. The average consumer trusts Amazon to send them a light bulb or a packet of batteries. But the average consumer probably doesn't trust them to put the environment first. The average consumer probably doesn't trust them to put ingredient integrity over profit. But the average Grove consumer trusts us to do that. And that's how we've always built our brand. And that's how we do business. And that trust I think has created really valuable relationships with our customers in both directions.
And you became a certified B Corp in 2016, is that right?
I think that's right.
Tell us, when did you first hear about the B Corp movement and how did you get involved in that?
So I started the company with great admiration for Method and Seventh Generation in particular, two brands that I saw as taking sustainable products and putting them at price and performance parity with conventionals. I'm really proud of the work we've done at Grove. I think we've sort of stood on their shoulders and gone a step further when it comes to sustainability in moving beyond plastic and a lot of the stuff we do to find extra efficacious natural formulations. But those companies were some of the first scale B Corps. I mean, I say scale, they were probably smaller back then than they are now. But I really looked up to them. And so it was never a question in my mind whether we would be a B. And, I think you have to get to a couple million, at least at that time. It's hard to go through the assessment if you didn't have any revenue. So we started in 2012, but we were not fast out of the gate, I'll put it that way. And so it took us a minute to get to a scale where being a B Corp was relevant. But it was fait accompli. I mean, there's no question that we've always wanted to be one. We're up for renewal this year. Not a question internally of, hey, should we do this? B Corp certification is imperfect, but it is far and away the best we have and an incredible step towards, I think, the inevitable necessity of using business to solve the world's most important problems.
You mentioned something that I think's important and affects a lot of our listeners and folks in the space, which is like price parity compared to conventional. And I'm curious, how do you think brands like maybe Seventh Gen or others, how are they actually doing that? Is it just because the profit margin for, the older business model is jacked up so high that if you don't take that much profit, you can sort of, what are you seeing as price of ways to get price parity in the space?
It's a great question. And unfortunately, you can't be at price parity for every consumer, right? When I say price parity, I'm really talking about our consumer. And, our consumers range from sort of $30,000, $40,000 a year, all the way up to the top. But there's a real swath of the country that's low income, and we can't be at price parity for those consumers yet. But I think our experience, and I think this is, if you talk to any of the folks who've created brands in space, is finding a really big group of customers, figuring out what they care about, and then delivering a great product at whatever price they're expecting. And maybe you have to deliver a slightly different product, but it can still meet their needs. A great example of this for us was ready to use sort of water-filled hard surface cleaners, right? If you have a glass cleaner, a countertop cleaner, that product is 95 to 99% water. Shocking, I know. It looks like water. It almost is water. So we sell 1 ounce concentrates that you mix with the water that comes out of your sink. huge savings in the supply chain, huge savings on carbon, huge savings on, I mean, ours are obviously plastic free, but huge savings on plastic. I mean, it's just a better product with a lighter environmental footprint. We also use 100% essential oil-based fragrance, which is different than all of our competitors. And that's more expensive. So in this case, we only have to give you a 1 ounce all-purpose cleaner when many of our competitors are giving you, 16, 24 ounces, and you mix it at home. But because of that, we can actually be lower cost than some of our competitors while providing you with a higher quality product. And there's dozens of metaphors for that across our business. So I think we've always been clear that, we're not going to be the low cost leader, but we're never going to achieve our vision and hit the scale we need if we're not operating at a price point that allows you to get scale. And I should say, that's a very haha, everything is good answer. The other truth of that is you have to sell a lot more of them because you make less money, right? We could sell our zero plastic products from an ingredient standpoint, from a fragrance standpoint, we could sell them for, $10 a bottle instead of $4.50 or $4, or they're different prices for different products, but we could double the pricing and we could build a business that was much more likely to succeed, but much less likely to scale. And so we were always really clear that our goal was scale. And so that meant lower margins, to your point, but more volume. And that was our strategy from the beginning. And so we never considered, should we make a product that only applies or is only approachable to people who make $100,000, $200,000 a year? Because who wants to pay, $15 for a dish soap? We were really clear, build a product that has broad appeal and a broad price point, and then get to scale, and the economics end up working at scale.
And so, you mentioned it also that your plastic initiative. Can you tell folks, how did this come about, this idea of zero plastic, and, why it's important to you and what sort of progress you've made to date?
Yeah, so we've stated publicly that our goal is to be plastic free by 2025. It's an ambitious goal. We're sitting here in 2023. I'm not 100% sure we'll get there, but I'm 100% sure we've made incredible strides. And the reason we put that goal out there and made it such a central priority for us is if you look at our industry, it's the most important sustainability issue in the industry, period, right? I think everybody probably who listens to your podcast understands that plastic is a petrochemical product. It's closely linked to carbon. People probably also understand the dangers of microplastics, which are everywhere, right? They're in your drinking water. They're in the deepest parts of the ocean. They're in virgin snow in the Antarctic, and they're in an unborn baby's blood. They are everywhere. And it's only getting worse. And plastic packaging accounts for almost 50% of the plastic waste every year. Just plastic packaging, forever garbage that we're just using to package something. It's incredible and insane. And of all of the industries, think about your shower. Think about what's under your sink. Think about what's in your laundry room, right? We're so reliant on single-use plastic to make our industry go round. If we want consumer products to be a positive force for human and environmental health, there is literally no way for that to be possible while we are reliant on single-use forever garbage that destroys the planet. And I believe that you create a bold goal, you might not get all the way there, but you will create bold action. And that's what we've seen. And so since we set that goal, we've now sold well over $100 million a year of Beyond Plastic. That's our sort of plastic-free certification, sort of organic. Sometimes it's 99.5% plastic-free, and so it's still technically beyond plastic. And anyway, but that's sort of our seal for products that have made the progress we want to see on plastic. And we sell well over $100 million a year of those products, the fastest growing product line. And I think consumers really care. And so it's an area that's really interesting in sustainability because it's not polarizing, right? People can argue whether climate change is man-made or not. I don't think that's an argument, but it's a contentious political issue in some circles. Nobody can argue whether or not plastic waste exists and is man-made, right? It's a common sense sustainability issue. And so it's one that's allowed us to build a really big tent around sustainability that doesn't exclude, red state, blue state, high education, less education. It's a big tent issue. And we love that about it. So anyway, we think it's the most important sustainability issue, and we're proud to take a bold stance on it.
Yeah, and I've heard from some people that have worked closely with you that you're not really joking in the sense that you're there's like people taking out pieces of plastic and like weighing them on a scale from like your products and being like, this little straw weighs like 0.2 grams. And then like,
That's 100%
yeah,
correct. If you don't measure it, like you can't do it. It's interesting. You say that as though we're like being extreme. I feel like if you don't do that, you're just like, it's bullshit. You have to measure everything. We report with our quarterly earnings our plastic intensity every single quarter. And over the last 8 quarters, we've driven down our plastic intensity, which we define as sort of pounds of plastic per $100 of sales. We've driven that number down every quarter, and we're going to continue driving it down. And that's a first class metric for us that we report next to revenue. And sure, it's probably true that the average investor doesn't care about it. But for folks who are tracking our long-term vision and believe that by being the true leader in zero plastic and zero waste product, we're going to create a massively valuable enterprise, that's an important KPI. And I also believe every business needs to have like a positive impact. And this is a great way to report transparently on ours. So yes, absolutely. In our database, we know the percent plastic by weight of every single product that we sell. And we will not like bring any new products in without monitoring that. And, Ryan, I hope you are a Grove customer. Trust you are. I could tell you how much plastic you've used. And I could also tell you how much plastic you've saved through innovations like concentrate and the zero waste aluminum packaging. And I could tell you that as well. So we don't just measure how much plastic we're still selling. We also measure on a customer level how big everybody's positive impact is.
That's pretty cool. The other piece that I wanted to speak with you about is, you're, like I said at the top, you're, head of a publicly traded company. And I don't think many listeners get to hear sort of like what it's like to be in that role. And I'm just curious, could you sort of explain I guess listeners will want to know sort of the pressures once you take on investment capital and then like what the IPO process is like, what you expected, what was new. I'm just kind of curious that whole process for you.
Yeah. So I should start by saying Grove has been really lucky in having great investors, and we've raised an insane amount of capital. We raised about $600 million behind the mission overall, which is an incredible amount. And it's an incredible privilege. And yeah, it creates as much pressure as you let it, right? I mean, the pressure is there. You can just choose to acknowledge it or not. And so for us, a big part of the long-term journey, and I talked about starting my career in investing, has been how do you find investors who understand that the way we are going to create long-term value is by being a sustainability leader. And I think there are lots of investors out there who understand the pressing nature of the environmental crises and that can actually be a benefit, not a detriment. And with the right investors and the right business model, I don't believe in the sort of tension between sustainability and good business. Right? It's hard to raise money if you're a ruthless jerk, like starting a company only to make money. It's also hard to raise money if you're a like bleeding heart like I am, right? Neither one of them definitionally makes it easier. And so being public is just the next sort of like step in that journey where we're accountable to shareholders just like we were before, but we also have, I think, the privilege of being a lot more transparent. And when you're private, you don't put everything out there all the time. And so it's a privilege to be more transparent, but it's also, I think, challenging because the stock market is very short-term focused, right? Like a stock can move up, 50% in like a few hours or down, or like, who knows, right? Like during this call, who knows what happened to our stock? And none of it is because of anything that changed in the business during that time. And so how do we keep a really long-term lens and focus on long-term problems despite the sort of churn of the stock market on a day-to-day basis? And that's a really interesting responsibility as the head of the company to make sure we keep our values, we keep our long-term focus, and we do what our shareholders expect us to do in terms of sort of serving the market, providing transparency, and being good stewards of capital on a short-term basis. So I don't know. I think it's actually kind of fun, but it definitely requires a fair amount of discipline in terms of making sure that the market can be cruel on a day-to-day basis. But what I can control is the long term. And if I have conviction in that, which I absolutely do, stay the course.
What's a couple things that really surprised you once you were public that you didn't expect?
So the thing that was probably the most positive of all of this. So when we went public, you go to the New York Stock Exchange, they put up your big banner. And the morning before you ring the bell, my daughter, who just turned 6 yesterday, actually rang the bell. Youngest person to ring the bell at the New York Stock Exchange, my daughter. Very proud of that. Anyway, it was next generation. That was sort of the thinking. I was like, I don't want to ring the bell. Who can ring the bell that represents our vision? The next generation. Anyway, but before that, you get to have a bunch of sort of team members out there, and they do a live stream for all the team members who couldn't come. Everything's on a very tight schedule. So I had 3 minutes to talk. And I thought a lot about what I wanted to say to the company because it's a very special moment. It's interesting for us because I think a lot of companies were started to be companies, right? And, the business of business is business. You want to make money. But our company, not just me, but I think everybody who works there, you work at Grove because you want to change the world. Right? We pay well and it's good, whatever. But really, it's like, you want to change the world. And so what we talked about that day was the validation of the idea that you could create a company who exists to change the world, could grow as quickly as we can in the capitalist system, and hopefully be a proof point that however we did it, we've had a real impact on our category, which is one that touches almost every person in the world. And I'm sure the Margaret Mead quote that I love so much is almost a cliche to you. Never doubt a small group of well-intentioned people can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. I really do believe that our company is that small group of well-intentioned people. And look, what percentage of your listeners are going home tonight and being like, why am I using a 16-ounce glass cleaner when I could be using a 1-ounce concentrator? My dish soap comes in plastic. I'm contributing to the problem. Your listeners probably know plastic recycling is like a myth. Less than 10% actually gets recycled. Even the stuff that is recycled is going to get recycled 1 or 2 times. Like aluminum is way better. You should be using aluminum. Anyway, most of your consumers probably aren't thinking about that. But because of our presence in the industry, not just us, but a lot of big players are starting to think about that. And so that was an awesome moment. And it was awesome because we didn't make it about like, hey, this is a money thing. This is validation of the mission thing. And let's pull up our heads from being that small group of well-intentioned people toiling every day and be like, cool. We got a long way to go, but we should be proud of what we've accomplished today. So that was really awesome. That's
awesome. It sounds like the way that most public companies, their share price is not necessarily affected by the business operations. I mean, somewhat, but it's like by the large institutional investors that invest in the company. So what does that look like on the back end? Like institutional investors are coming to you and saying, hey, tell us about XYZ. We're thinking about putting in 100 million into the fund, or like, what does that process look like?
Yeah. So it's interesting. Every company has a different version of that process, and investors are just people. You got to meet them. You got to talk to them. And we went public at a time that was really bad for our sector. And so we're building up our shareholder base, and it's a process that'll take time. And it's interesting. One of our long-term shareholders sold down their holdings in the last quarter really quickly. And I admit that hurt my feelings. I was like, these people don't believe in us anymore. They don't believe in me. I wish they could see what we're doing, all this great stuff. I want to show them. But I can't, right? Because we're public and that's non-public information. And that's just sort of how the game goes. So what I think is really great about it, though, is the market is irrational in the short term. There's a famous Warren Buffett quote, right? In the short term, it's a voting booth. In the long term, it's a weighing scale. And if I can say this, fuck the short term, right? I can't control that. But we have an amazing team that's wildly focused on how do we build the right product for our customers over the long term. We're in Target and Walmart, CVS, Meijer, Giant Eagle, a bunch of other places today, growing our distribution of our products. Our digital offering is better than it's ever been before. And I think the business itself is getting better in a lot of ways. It'll take a long time for those to sort of be obvious in financials, totally. But that's okay, right? This is a long-term problem. I've been doing this for, a decade, and this is why it's so good to work in a business where you love the mission, right? We keep doing it for a decade, and the share price will follow. So I guess the summary answer is, it's sad anytime somebody sells the stock. It's kind of like getting a no in a pitch. And it's sad when someone who's been your partner for a long time says, I don't want to be a partner with you anymore. Maybe that's because of us. Maybe it's like institutional stuff at their firm. Who knows? But that stuff is sad. But it goes back to the point of focus on the long term. All that stuff kind of comes out in the wash.
I'm curious if the legal benefit, you guys are both a certified B Corp and a legal benefit corporation. Have you had any instances where you were getting pressure from shareholders that you were like, thank God I'm a benefit corporation because we don't only have to maximize shareholder value right now? Like, is that...
So can I back this up a step and make sure your listeners know exactly?
Oh, yeah, go for it.
We have been a certified B Corp, which means we sort of like have all the practices, all the like things. And I should say we've learned a ton from that process. For those of you thinking about it, do it. It is totally worth it. Also, it's totally imperfect. B Labs is a great organization. They know it. It is imperfect. It is still worth the hassle and worth doing. But that's really about sort of like what you do. There's a legal structure. We, for a long time, were Growth Collaborative Inc. And we were sort of a Delaware C Corp. And Delaware C Corp are governed by a statute of fiduciary responsibility where my ultimate responsibility, our board's ultimate responsibility was to shareholders, right? We have to do what maximizes shareholder value. And that doesn't mean do what maximizes shareholder value tomorrow. It could be over 10 years, whatever. We changed our company to be a public benefit corp, a PBC, which changed our legal obligation from being just to our shareholders to also being to our employees, to the environment, and to our communities, as well as to our shareholders. Ryan, how did I do on that?
That was great.
Pretty good.
And was that pre-IPO or post?
It was pre-IPO. We could never have done it post-IPO. This is one of those things that good to have an opinionated founder CEO and jam it through pre-IPO. But also we had to get a full shareholder vote for it. And so good to have shareholders who understand that that's part of it. And there hasn't been a specific moment where I've been like, ooh, my sustainability interests are on one side, my shareholder interests are on the other. Because I think the success of our business and the success of our mission are so intrinsically linked. The thing that I think it does do is it makes it really clear to everyone, right? Our directors, our shareholders, our employees, our customers, our consumers, our partners, what kind of company we are. And we will always be the kind of company that wants to put people and planet as sort of first-class citizens along with shareholder returns. Like, we're a for-profit company. Those people didn't give us all that money because we're a charity, right? They want us to turn it into more money. And we've still got, I think, a great chance to do that. So it's been an awesome asset for us. I haven't yet found the sort of like legal flexibility to be the reason it's terrific. I'm still very glad that we did it. I think down the road it certainly could be. But I just believe that authenticity counts, right? In the beginning, we were like, how do you differentiate from Amazon? Who's never going to be a PBC is Amazon. And I just think like the soup tastes better when it's made with love. And we got to make it with love every day. And part of that is being the company our customers want us to be, which means being a certified B Corp, being a PBC, treating our employees fairly, always considering the environment, always thinking about, we spend a bunch of money coaching people deep in our supply chain on how to run more sustainable manufacturing operations. That doesn't impact our P&L, right? It does actually impacts it negatively because we pay for that, but it's the right thing to do. And, are we doing what our customers would want us to do, even when they're not looking? I think that's the foundation of a great brand because it shows up in everything and how our employees talk about it. Anyway, so not to get too spiritual about it, I just think authenticity counts. And if you're a company that stands for good, you should have a corporate structure that stands for good.
I'm also wondering how much you don't know in the sense of some activist investors that were like, we should buy into Grove. Oh, wait, they're a PBC, so we actually can't force them.
Nobody's saying that.
No one's saying that.
I don't buy that. And if they are, then screw them. They're not educated enough, right? They're going to miss out in the long run. Anybody who thinks at this stage in our evolution as a species, where it's so obvious, to me anyway, that climate and environmental causes are going to be first-class motivators of consumer behavior over the next 2 to 3 decades. If you miss that, you can't miss that. And so I understand there are people who don't believe that, but I think there are plenty of people who do. And I don't know. Got to break some eggs to make an omelet. I'm clear about which side of the fence I sit on. And I think that's an asset.
I'm curious if you could do it over, would you take the company public again? Or like, it seems like a lot of the things you want to do with your mission, like scale and others, like now that you have the 2020 hindsight, would you do it again the same way, or would you make any tweaks?
I try to take the philosophy of whatever we did is great. If it worked, it worked. If it didn't, we learned a lot of amazing stuff. And since we've gone public, we went public at a really terrible time. If your listeners are pulling up our stock chart, it's ugly, right? It's a challenging time for our industry. And that's put some pressure on us to make us a better company. And I'm really grateful for that pressure. I'm grateful for those learnings. If we'd stayed private, would we have had the pressure to become a better company the way we have on the public side? I don't know. And, being a better company is about being more profitable. It's about finding ways to drive more customer-centric innovation so that more people try our zero plastic, zero waste products. And there's a lot of ways to be a better company. And the pressure has been great for us. So, and I should say, we've also built some amazing new public in partnership with the Virgin Group and Richard Branson, who's a huge believer in the importance of removing plastic from the supply chain, removing plastic from as many consumer products as possible. And so, you talked about people who don't invest because they're like, oh, it's a PBC. What is that? I think there's probably more people, and Richard is one of those folks, who invested in part because they're long-term thinkers and they believe in the long-term mission. So it's impossible for me to know if we'd have a better outcome if we'd not gone public or if we had. I mean, what I really try to think about is if our goal is to be the most important company in transitioning consumer products to be a positive force for human and environmental health over the next 20 years. I think a lot of the learnings we got from being public will help us achieve that. And I mean, obviously I'm an optimist and like a forward-looking guy, right? You don't start a company that competes directly with Amazon if you're not at least a little bit naive and optimistic. But I should say we don't really compete directly with them now. We actually sell our products on Amazon now, some of them.
Yeah, because you have private label stuff too, right?
Own brands.
Yep.
Own brands. We don't private label. We have a big team in-house that develops. When I talk about the zero plastic products, those are our Grove Co. products. And that's a brand that's been developed entirely in-house. Our formulations, our scientists doing the hard work, figuring out how you get enzymatic cleaners to be stable inside of aluminum, which is turns out a really hard science problem. Anyway, so yeah, I don't know. I feel really grateful for the path that we're on and the learnings that we've gotten. And I feel like it's, in 20 years, we're going to look back and be like, gosh, going public was a really critical decision. And I'm really grateful for where we are. And that's a part of it. So that's how I think about it. And I don't know, I love being public. It allows me to talk to way more people about our mission, which I totally love.
Hey man, we need more people changing the culture there in Wall Street and big finance.
Dude, your lips to God's ears.
Because I know that there's maybe 10 or 15 publicly traded B Corps, and that's way more than it was in 5 years ago. I think there was one. So
yeah, it's going to continue to increase. I'm certain of that. I'm obviously talking about my own book, but I'm very, very much of a long-term believer in the idea that the smartest people in the world, where talent goes, is where the next big companies will get built, and that the smartest people in the world now are demanding to work at companies with purpose. And I think that talent is going to force companies that aren't purpose-led to become purpose-led. And, there's probably people started listening to this podcast who are thinking of starting a company who are purpose-led, and they're going to be able to attract better talent. And I think that talent is the thing that shapes the future, right? Where the smartest people go. And I think the smartest people are going to go into purpose-led organizations. And so, you will see the flowers sort of from that everywhere, very much including a bunch of companies that are wildly successful PBCs going public, unapologetically financially successful with terrific sustainability impacts.
I'll throw a couple random questions at you. What is the book you most often give as a gift?
Letters from a Stoic, Seneca book. I had a kidney transplant a few years ago. It caused me to do a lot of reflection on the value of every day. I find it more accessible than the other book I often give as a gift, which is Man's Search for Meaning, which I think is like as close to defining the meaning of life as possible. Anyway, but I really enjoy the idea that we have so much choice in how we address the world, and it is our greatest duty to choose to address it in a way that the Stoics talk about being a good citizen, right? Being a good citizen of the world, a good steward of our resources. I get very excited about those concepts.
I'll check that one out. What do people never ask you that you wish they did?
Who are the other people on the journey? Because I think it is so unfair that, I should say, I think that our society and our systems totally are unfair in terms of the way we distribute wealth and attention. And I think that entrepreneurs and entrepreneur CEO founders like me get, so much of the attention when really it's the teams that deserve the work. And, my co-founders, Chris and Jordan, have been with me for a decade. And we have amazing teams behind us at Grove. I want to name like 100 people. And I think that I get to say nice things on podcasts, but these are the people who are doing the real work that matters.
Yeah, I love that question of who else is not getting attention. Because it's true, there's a sort of scarcity of attention resource, right?
Totally. And I understand why the CEO is supposed to be the sort of mouthpiece of the company. And you can't give media training to everyone all the way down the line, right? It's just sort of not how it works. But I feel such a deep sense of gratitude for the team. I get to talk about the zero plastic product and how exciting it is and how innovative it is. And if any of you are listening and you haven't downloaded the Grove app and gotten your zero plastic product, you should. And I had almost nothing to do with those products, right? There's like a team of chemists in our office right now figuring out how you get enzymatic, highly efficacious liquid laundry to work in aluminum zero plastic bottles. It's a super hard science problem, and I'm going to have nothing to do with solving it. And anyway, I just feel so much gratitude to the teams.
And last couple of questions here. What do you need right now, and how can the listeners help you grow this next economy?
Well, I think the thing that we all underestimate is the impact of our own actions and the impact of our own voice. I think it's really easy to forget that every dollar we spend is a vote for the world we want to live in. And I think it's really easy to forget our own influence because the world is really busy, right? It's complicated. I've got little kids. It's busy. But we all have the ability to make small positive changes. And that's part of the catalyst for starting Grove, right? How do we make it easy to make some? But, there are dozens and dozens of examples every day of how we can support. I like the idea of the next economy, right? Support an economy that gives back to the ecosystems we've depleted, that creates a future that is sustainable, inclusive, all of the things we want to see. And I just think it's easy to underestimate the power of our own voice in that. I like the idea that it's kind of like voting, right? We all understand why it's important to vote. I assume we do. Because if everybody who thought like us didn't vote, well then, that doesn't work. And the same is exactly true when it comes to the economy we want to have, right? How we participate in the economy is a direct vote for, I think, the kind of economy we have. Oh, and the other thing I would say is if you have children or if you are a young person, or I suppose actually anybody, like where you use your talent matters. Like if your talent is the thing that creates the future, right? And so one of my personal missions is to try to get more smart people to stop working so much just for money and start working to use business or whatever to solve the world's most important problems, sustainability, which is my passion, or otherwise.
Well, last question here. How can we learn more about your work? Where can, if you want to shout out website, apps, other stuff that socials, other folks should go to learn more about your work?
Yeah, so the Grove app is probably the best place to see all the great stuff that we do. You'll see all of our products there and a lot of the other brands that we carry. Follow us on Instagram is like a lower commitment way to check it out. And if you're in Target and you see it on the shelf, pick it up. It's a great product. If it's not, tweet at me, find me, email me, sl@grove.co. And I'll make sure you get a refund if you don't like it. But I think in general, I appreciate the support, and I just appreciate, I know that you've created a really great tribe over the years, Ryan, that believes that we do have agency to shape the future into one that can be positive. And so I have a sneaking suspicion that, I have a debt of gratitude to all the people listening to this podcast and thinking actively about how we can use our own time, energy, etc., to create the world we want to live in.
Well, thanks so much for being on the show, Stu. It's great having you on. And, I realize we both have kids about the same age. I have 6. My son is 5.5, almost 6, and daughter's 8. So definitely doing this for the future, I believe.
It's amazing, right? You think about the world those kids are going to live in, and even the proliferation of plastic waste, and what is the beach going to look like? We had an employee we almost hired who applied to Grove because his daughter, who was 7, didn't want to go in the Pacific Ocean because she was scared of the Great Pacific Plastic Patch.
Wow. That's deep.
Anyway, but we can change it, right? We still have time, I believe.
Yeah. Well, great. Thanks again, and we'll have you back on soon.
A pleasure, Ryan. Thanks so much for having me.
Next Economy Now is a production of Lift Economy. To listen to all of our episodes, go to lifteconomy.com/podcast. That's LIFT economy.com/podcast. You can also sign up for our monthly newsletter at lifteconomy.com/newsletter. Please also rate and review our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening.